Hi, this is al-Hilo, and I'm your instructor in the course of short story. This is the first lecture, and to be honest, it is impossible to cover everything about short story, its origins, its history, its development, its evolution, its future, what we expect from it, and the theories about this genre. But in this course, I'm going to focus on the most important features, definitions, characters, and elements of short story. And of course, we will be studying some examples of short story and to analyze and to try to see those theories, those elements, and find them in some examples, some real examples from great writers. So today we will be talking about the genesis, the very beginning, the ABC of short story. And the best way, the safest way to start our lecture is to see the definition, to talk about the definition of this genre, which is a short story is a piece of prose fiction that can be read in one sitting and focuses on one major event. It is shorter than a novel. It concentrates on the mood rather than the plot. The word count is typically from 1,000 to 4,000. So we find some points in this definition, and it is very concise yet very comprehensive. It describes the general nature of this genre. And first, we should know that it is a piece of fiction, so it belongs to literature. It's something normal and for granted. And mostly, it should be read in one sitting. Of course, it is a very, relative definition, a very relative characteristic, because some of us might have, the patience to read one big novel in one sitting. Maybe we are ready to spend 10 to 12 hours in one sitting reading one book, while other people might do not have that patience. They get bored very soon, and they cannot spend even 5 minutes sitting on a chair reading a book. So it's very relative and very subjective definition. It's not very accurate, but it describes, or it tries to show you the meaning of short story, which one sitting might be 1 hour, 2 hours. So mostly this piece of fiction should be read in one sitting of 1 hour, 2 hours. Okay, so it should not be so long, and it should be read very easily and smoothly without getting bored. And next thing is that it focuses on one major event. Look, in novel, normally we have the complexity. We have so many events in one plot. We have so many conflicts. We have so many characters. We have so many things going on in a novel because the writer has so many space, has so much time, and he has the freedom, he has the luxury to read, to write, and to explain as much as he wishes. So there is no ending, there is no limit for his writing. So he has the freedom, he has the time and place to express his ideas, to elaborate on the plot and the events. So there is no limitations, there is no limit to the writing of novel. While for short story, the writer should be so concise, so precise, so short, so to portray, to display the main ideas in one sitting. Okay, he should make it very short. He should put his ideas, the events, the conflicts, the things that are going on in the story in a nutshell, okay? So that the reader can grasp those ideas, those themes, those conflicts and events in one sitting, in one reading. So again, it is shorter than a novel. It's something for granted, of course, and it concentrates on the mood rather than the plot. This is a very interesting point because the writer here in the short story does not invest so much in the plot. The plot, because you need so much space and time to elaborate and to make it crafty, okay, make some masterpiece in the plot. While in short story you do not have that luxury of time and place, as we have explained earlier. So the writer here compensates this shortness, this lack of time and space, by moving on from the focus on the plot into the focus on the mood, on the psychological side of the characters and the events. So here we find, some focus on the psychological side, on the mood, on what is going on in the mind of the characters, and those that are mostly emotional, okay, that belong to the subjective part of the event, to the subjective part of the characters. So the plot might not be complete. we might do not have that complete sequence of plot, like the beginning, the middle, and the end. We might have just one line of events without any rise or fall in the events, because the focus of the writer is mostly on the mood of the characters rather than the plot. And of course, as some general rule, that the word count of a short story is from 1,000 to 4,000, while in a novel we need at least 20,000 words. Okay, that's the least we need. That's the minimum word count. While in short story we can just make it in 1,000 words. So that's a very concise, comprehensive definition of short story. So again, a short story should be very short and concise, because look, we are living in an age of movement. We are living in an age of fast food. Okay, people do not have that time to spend much time on eating and cooking some main dish, spending 3 to 4 hours just making one dish for the dinner, while they can just go out and go to McDonald's and have one hamburger, okay, and just go back home and continue their work, their daily life activity. Now it is the time of movement. It is the age of speed. Okay, people are in a hurry. They do not have that time to spend much time reading. That's why, as a compensation, as an alternative to novel, we have that revolution, that changing, that evolution in literature. We moved on from writing and reading novel into short story, which is, of course, it's a very nice movement. It's a very nice, development to keep people busy and interested in literature. So let's move on to the next point, which is the element of short story. Look, as you see, I've mentioned only 4 elements. Of course, we cannot, limit the elements of short story within only 4 factors, 4 points, because you might mention maybe tens of features, tens of elements for short story, and they all might be correct, but they are very debatable. They are very controversial. That's why these 4 points are accepted by most of the critics, of literary critics. That's why, to be on the safe side, I've only mentioned these 4 elements, which are: number 1, character; number 2, plot; number 3, setting; and number 4, theme. So let's read something in detail about these points. Number 1, character. Again, in character we have 4 subcategorization, 4 types of characters, which is number 1, the protagonist, which is what the main character. The main character. Most of the time, we watch movies that, of course, have one protagonist. However, in other movies, we might find 2 protagonists. Okay, so that's not a big deal. We can have more than 1 protagonist. So I've just been watching today an amazing movie called Emma, and that girl, the protagonist Emma, was the center, was the core of all events. All the events, all the characters, all the conflicts were revolving around this main character, around the protagonist. So the protagonist is the main character. Number 2, we have the antagonist. Okay, the antagonist is the character that stands as rival to the protagonist. So the antagonist is always the enemy of the character. He is the one who always tries to destroy the day. He tries to destroy the plans of the protagonist. We have so many examples of antagonists. Like, for example, let's take a literary example. Like in Hamlet, we have Claudius. In Dostoevsky, we have Mephistopheles. We have Lucifer and other characters. So in movies, you can also find so many examples that represent the meaning and the stance of antagonists. Number 3, we have foil. Foil is a character whose traits contrast with those of another. Look, the foil is not necessarily a bad guy. He is not a bad character. He is not antagonist. But he might be a good guy. But his characters are in contrast with that of the protagonist. Let's take a very famous example of the foil. For example, we have the masterpiece, the great Tom and Jerry. Okay, that's animation. In Tom and Jerry, Tom and Jerry, they are the foils of each other. Okay, they are both protagonists. They are both the good guys in the movie, but they are the foil of each other. Their traits, their characteristics are in contrast with the other. That's why, because they do not cope with each other. They are always fighting, but they both are lovable. We cannot hate neither of them. Okay, neither of them is an antagonist. They are the foil of each other. Okay, that's the definition and the best representation of the foil. And the last point in character, the last type, okay, here I've mentioned, is the confidant. The confidant is the character, is a character who is a close friend of the main character. Look, in so many movies, we find the confidant plays a great role. Okay, in the stories, in the movies. For example, in The Lord of the Rings. Okay, we in that movie we see that those two guys, those two characters, they go. I forgot their names. Okay, they go to the volcano. The main character is always holding that ring, while his friend, the confidant, does all the job. Okay, he gets all the job done. He always, carries the burden of the ring. Okay, he always undergoes those misfortunes. Okay, the problems. So the confidant is the friend of the protagonist, and in most movies, in traditional type of movies, we see that the confidant always die at the end. Okay, and the protagonist survives in comedies, in happy endings. So the confidant dies and the protagonist survives and he becomes the hero, while the real hero in most of the movies and stories is the confidant. Let's move on to element number 2, which is the plot. And again, we have four subcategorizations of the plot. The plot is the sequence of the events that occur in a story. It is not a story, it is the sequence of the events. Okay, it is how that story appears in a fiction, in a movie. Okay, that's called the plot. So we have four elements or four components of the plot, which is number one, exposition. Exposition is everything the reader or the audience needs to know to understand the story. So it is the beginning of a story. It is the beginning of a movie. It is the introduction. In exposition, we come to know about the characters, the time, the setting, the themes, the conflicts. We get introduced to the place, to those people in conflict. So it is the introduction to everything. Okay, that's a very pivotal and fundamental part to know, because once we miss the exposition, once we miss the introduction, we will have so much problem and difficulty in understanding the rest of the story. Number two, we have the conflict, which is the beginning of the problem. It is the beginning of the problem. It is the time when we find two people start fighting with each other. This is the beginning of the problem. And the next one is the climax, which is the highest point of the problem, where everything gets complicated and there is no way to go back and to fix things. We should just move on. That's the highest point in the problem. That's the highest degree in the problem of the story. And immediately after the climax, we will find the resolution, which is the end of the problem. The end might be a happy ending or a sad ending. Let's go to number three, which is setting. In most of the definitions of setting, we only find that it is, people describe it or define setting as the place and time of a story. However, that's, we will not do justice to setting by just putting these two elements to setting, because elements is just wider and more important than just confining it within two components. So that's why I found other features of setting, other components of the setting, which are number one, culture. Okay, look, knowing and getting identified to the culture is a very important thing, okay? Because without knowing the culture, we will have some problems in understanding the story, okay? Because the same event, okay? Let's, for example, take the example of Hamlet, okay? Let's imagine that Hamlet was an Iraqi guy, okay? The events, the development of the conflict, the climax, and the ending would be completely different. Why? Because we have to deal with completely different culture, okay? It is no longer that English Shakespearean culture. We have the Iraqi culture. We have a different culture, okay? So we have to pay much attention and just focus to understand, to recognize the culture of the story, of the events. And number two, the historical period. The historical period is, of course, another important factor which we have to understand in order to come into better conclusions, to understand the story better, okay? Because historical periods might be different. Let's imagine, for example, the same Hamlet. If he was in the 21st century, of course, we would see and observe different developments and different conflicts and different climax. So to know the historical period is of great importance. And the third one is the geography. Of course, the geography or the place plays a great role in defining the development of the story. And the next one, which we might hear so few or so little about this one, which is hour. Hour plays a great role in the development of the conflict. Let's, for example, take an example, Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. Okay, when Brutus comes to plot about the assassination of the Caesar, he does that with his friends at night. Okay. We should know the hour of the taking place of the conflict. Otherwise, it would not make sense to us. Okay, we cannot imagine that plotting is done in some public places at noon. Okay, the hour should be, should cope with the conflict, with the event that is taking place. So the hour is another important component of setting. And number 4, the theme is the main idea of the story. Okay, in short story, we might have one theme. Okay, but in other literary, works, we may find maybe tens or hundreds of themes. We cannot confine a literary work to only one theme. Okay, we can find hundreds of themes in one literary work. So theme is another important component of short story, and we will continue this introductory course about short story in the coming lectures. So please keep tuned, and thank you very much.